you back to the journey. This is going to be part number 3. We're simulcasting with not only for an episode on the YouTube channel, but also we're live here. You know what it is for our Instagram live. And I hope that I actually am filming this correctly. Marlo, what's going on? I see you. Good to see you. So our first 2 segments of the journey, we talked about just a lot of the things that I went through kind of growing up, starting in the barber industry, getting through barber school, moving to Atlanta, just a lot of different transitions. So now we're going to a different level now. Now we're actually going to be getting into what it was like when I first started working in barbershops here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'll take that as a compliment that I look up my dad. So basically what we're going to talk about today is the different barbershops that I worked in and so much of the different situations that I kind of went through. And like I talked about before, and like we've talked about in the past, with the first 2 episodes, this is going to be live on the Instagram as well. Tay, I see you. I look forward to seeing you in a few days when we start back on campus. Alright, so where I left off at was I got my barber license and I started working on my first barbershop. So when I first was living here in Georgia, I lived in Snellville, Georgia. And I found a barbershop that literally was in walking distance from where I lived. So rather than, I didn't go through a long process of trying to find different shops to work in like I really should have. I see you, Tay. I didn't. I basically just said, well, this is convenient. It's right down the street, so let me just try to work here. And, so that's what I did. And when I did that, I actually ended up going and working there, and the owner was originally from Boston, which was just a coincidence. And what was kind of cool about the place that she had at the time, and the place was called Kings and Queens, was that it had 3 chairs right in the front, and it had 4 suites. Well, we didn't even call them suites at the time. It was 4 little rooms, and then a huge shampoo area in the back. And it was cool because that was really my introduction to really suites and having a suite in your own space. So I started there. I don't remember how much I was paying, but it wasn't much. I started working there, and I had one of the suites, and there was 2 other stylists there. There was 3 barbers in the front, and also my sister was working there too as well. Shouts out Rachel. She was living here in Atlanta for a little while. RL Hair Lounge. That's where you can check her out. She has a shop right now in Boston. So I started working there, first shop, and when you get out of school, you typically, I'll just say for me, I kind of felt like I knew what I was doing, but at the same time, there's still some reservation because now you're getting paid for what you're doing, so it's different as opposed to just practicing. So I remember doing my first haircut in the barbershop and just being super nervous. Now, if you remember back to the first story, or the second episode, I talked about working at a shop in Boston briefly. Now I'm gonna double back to that for a second. So right as I got my license in Massachusetts, right before I moved to Georgia, I actually started working in the barbershop in my last month of school. It was called King Cuts off of Norfolk Street, Norfolk and Morton Street, not far from where I used to live growing up in Boston, in Dorchester, Mattapan area. And I remember starting to work there. And a big shout out to my family up there. Man, I'm forgetting everybody's names now, but I know I'm going to remember by the time we're done. But they gave me my first shot. They gave me my first chance to work in a barbershop. And one of the barbers there, I remember him telling me, and he has a barbershop in North Carolina now. And you know who you are. Because I'm on live, I'm forgetting people's names, but I know it's going to come up. Okay, now, I remember now. So Patrick, he was the owner. Gave me my first shot, my first chair ever in a barbershop. And Chuck, see, I knew I was going to remember in a second because the cameras on, so it's throwing me off. Chuck, my guy Chuck has a barbershop. He might have 2 barbershops in North Carolina now. To me, he was always the nicest barber in there. And I remember at one point, cut my first 2, 3, 4, 5 heads. I would come in after school for a little bit at a time. And I remember kind of getting a little comfortable and starting to kind of talk while I was cutting. And I remember one time Chuck said to me, I'm talking and cutting, and I'm starting to feel a little loose. And, and Chuck says to me, yeah, you need to just focus on that haircut. You need as much concentration as you can get. I remember feeling like it like cut me to my heart. Because so I ended up asking him later, like, yeah, so you think I'm good, or cause, and I felt I just felt bad because it just hurt my feelings. But I'll never forget that. And years later, at a Bronner Brothers show here, I told him that story, and he just laughed. But I'll never forget that, him saying, "You need as much concentration as you can get." So that was really my first experience being in the shop. But that wasn't for too long before I moved here. So fast forward, I have my license here in Georgia. I start working at the shop, Kings and Queens, and it was okay. I mean, the experience was up and down. One of the things that I try to pride myself on is that anybody that I've ever worked with or worked for, I can go back and work with or work for them if I need to, or if I wanted to. So I try to really maintain the relationships that I have in the business, even though sometimes they don't end perfectly. That's just the way it is, and sometimes it's unfortunate how they end, but you live and you learn. So the interesting thing about it is, play cuts, I see you, but the interesting thing about it is, so when I started working at Kings and Queens, I remember this being said to me at one point. So there was three barbers in the front. There was Mike, another guy who was a little bit older, and Tony. Now Mike and Tony were both from New York. Okay, Tony was a little more old school. Mike to me was the best one in the shop, and then the other old school barber that was there, I remember he had the clipper that had the vacuum that was attached to it, and I remember he was decent, but he was a little bit slower behind Mike. So I remember Mike telling me, one day he said, yeah, after your first 2, 3, 4 days, old boy over here was saying how you're not gonna be no competition because you don't really know how to cut, and he was probably right. I mean, he was right. When you first got out of school, you have a foundation. But remember, I started from scratch, starting in barber school. I didn't have a background. I don't really feel like I was artistic. I didn't draw a lot. To me, I literally started the craft from scratch, from the bottom. Never picked up clippers. Never thought about cutting hair until I started barber school. But again, I kind of got my feelings. But my competitive nature, I think, helped to fuel me in that regard, because it's not like I put this guy's picture on the wall and was like, I'm going to make sure I keep him in mind whenever I'm cutting. It was just that subconsciously, I'm just very competitive, and it's something that's a challenge for me to sometimes slow it down. And I just never forgot that. So Mike and I became good friends, and, Braden, what's going on? I see you. Braids and Tings, I see you. Big Tings I come. See me, I say? When Danielle sees that, she's gonna be tripping. I'm working on my patois. See what I say? But anyway, so basically, I'm in the barbershop, and it's crazy because at this point, I'm starting to get a little bit better, and I really took to Mike and his style. Mike was probably he was the best barber that I knew, at that time, because what's going on, Danielle? I see you. I mean, shouldn't you be cooking or something? Shouldn't you be doing some work or something like that? Anyway, I'm gonna let that slide. So basically, I'm working in the barbershop, and I remember I took to Mike because Mike was the best barber that I'd ever been around. And the craziest part about Mike was every single client that he had, he would make sure that he used a hot towel on them when he was done. He was the first person to use the hot towel. He was the first person, Gillard David, I see you. He was the first person that would use enhancements. And this is before people were using enhancements. He was using the high beam spray. Now, years later, it was kind of like not the move, because high beams, eventually would kind of run down if you didn't put it on just perfectly. But this is back in the early 2000s. So he was using the high beam spray to enhance the line, hot towels, for every client. I mean, he cut super fast. I remember on Saturdays, he would come to work at 12 or 1 o'clock on Saturdays. Like, I promise you. He would come to work at 12, no earlier than 12 on Saturdays. And he would have 5, 6, 7, 8 people sitting down in the waiting area on him. Like, I kid you not. And the crazy part was that was part of the reason that was part of my growth, because a lot of times what started to happen was people would see me there on early, because I'd get there at 8 on Saturdays, and they'd be sitting there mad waiting on Mike. And eventually they'd say, you know what, let me just, can you just cut me up real quick or whatever. So I'd be shook, because I'd be cutting behind somebody who I knew was phenomenal, but I didn't have a choice but to cut their hair. What am I going to do, tell them no? So it forced me to step my game up. That feeling of being uncomfortable helped me to grow. It helped me to become better, because there's a quote that I've used that I used in my first book that I got from Mr. Harris at Atlanta Tech, and he says, "Growth brings discomfort." So sometimes you have to be uncomfortable to really grow. So that's what I learned from being in that situation was, and Mike taught me a lot. Our relationship had ups and downs here or there, but he's still one of my guys. Like, I've always tried to support him wherever I can, no matter where I've gone. When we're able to catch up with each other. But what's interesting is that really kind of helped me to grow as a barber, because I was forced to get better. I was forced to cut, and that's something that Diamond's Edge. I see you. I was forced to get better. I was forced to step my game up. So the crazy part about leaving that barbershop was I remember people were just getting fired left and right for stupid reasons. And the owner, she was just kind of tripping. Like I said, I don't have no problems with her, but at the time, I think even now she would admit that she was a little crazy at the time. And I remember like a barber getting handed a box and told that this was his last day, which was crazy to me. Lex, I see you. Which was crazy to me, because what barber gets handed a box? Like, this is like a corporate world, like a corporate job. So this and I remember Mike saying it one day, like, I've never seen a barber get fired, like it was a job. And I just remember that being kind of crazy, him getting handed a box. So when I was in the suite at the time in the back, I then got moved forward to the front. So now I'm in the front line with Mike, the other old school barber who eventually left, and me and myself. Eventually the old school barber left, and it was just me and Mike. So again, I learned so much from being next to him and being next to really greatness in that situation. So I'm there for, I don't know, maybe a year or so, starting to feel like what it's like to make money. And we were going to transition to another spot. A friend of Mike was going to put a shop together, and that didn't work itself out. I'm not going to bother getting deep into that, because basically he was going to have a shop, and he was going to charge a super high booth rent, and it was going to be super extravagant. And basically we ended up leaving to go to his shop, and it took forever for the shop to get open, and he just gave us a lot of promises that he just didn't keep. So for maybe a month, maybe 2 months, I was basically without a job, without a shop, because I had kind of put all my eggs in one basket to go there. So at that point, I'm asking around, and a friend of mine suggested to try to go to the shop in Lithonia. And Lithonia was a little bit more of a distance out from where I was living, but it wasn't far. So I drove down to Lithonia, and I found a shop on Main Street in Lithonia. So this is considered downtown Lithonia, and it was a shop that was called Slamming Cuts. Big shout out to Craig, Norris, and Ray. Ray and Norris were the co-owners of the shop, and I remember so I went in and did an interview, and they said, well, just do a haircut for us. And by this point, I'm feeling pretty confident, like I know what I'm doing. And I remember I brought in a haircut from one of my previous clients, and I do a fade, and I cut him up. I'm feeling pretty good. And Norris says to me, all right, so we're going to hire you. We're going to have you just start with even all overs for now, and then we'll go from there. So I'm like, start with even all overs? Like, what do you mean start with even all overs? So I took it personal again, because I felt like, okay, starting with even all overs means that the fade that I just did wasn't good enough, and it probably wasn't. So this is the second shop now. When I get in, I'm feeling away, like my competitor, but in my mind, I'm feeling slighted in a way. But what was crazy about working there was, again, they had owned that shop for years. I think it was like 20 years, some crazy amount of time, and they had been successful for so long. Norris and Ray probably encouraged me the most at this point. You know, Mike was a great barber, but the business acumen that I started to have, the hustle to be able to go out and get clients, was something that I learned from those two. And I remember Norris, he would say, you know, I'm gonna get these flyers printed up. You know, you guys gotta go pound that pavement. You know, don't be sitting around. Da, da, da. I shouldn't be watching you unless you're cutting hair. You shouldn't be sitting in these chairs just watching us cut. And I learned that mentality, and I learned to start to build that foundation of what it really meant to be a real barber and to be an entrepreneur from them, because they really tried to do a lot of different things to be able to help us grow as young barbers in the industry. And I remember working with my guy Craig, and I'm not even sure if Craig still cuts anymore, but we were both still kind of like newer barbers, and we were both still grinding to try to build clientele. So at that point, I still felt like there was 4 barbers at that shop. I felt like I was the 4th best. I felt like I could cut a little bit, but I still wasn't on that level. But I started to gain a lot of confidence working at Slam and Cuts. So big shots out to Norris, Ray, Craig, everybody over there. There was a salon next door. They always showed us a lot of love too. So you know, big shots out to them. Andre, I see you. So I'm at King Cuts. Then I went to Slam and Cuts in Lithonia, and eventually I decided to make a change. Now I made a change primarily because, you know, my transportation started getting kind of crazy, and I was just making crazy decisions, and you know, my transportation got bad because I kept on buying cheap cars. The cheap cars kept on dying out on me. So then I decided to find somewhere a little bit closer to home. Now in this time period, I'm also still at the point where I'm trying to figure out if I even want to be a barber because, you know, my parents at the time are seeing that I'm not really making money, because at this point I'm in my early 20s. They're seeing I'm not really making money, but they're trying to support me. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's not a good look because I'm driving around all the way out to Lithonia, but I'm not really earning any real money that I can save and actually where it's substantial. You know, so it's not a good look. Now, with that in mind, I end up finding the shop back in the Snellville area. And this is Historical Hair was the name of the shop. So remember that guy who got handed a box earlier at the first shop? He opened up a shop. Now, Tony was a good guy. Extremely fair. He was business minded. The only issue with Tony's shop was that, you know, even though it was always neat, clean, pristine, like always looked very good, you know, we didn't even have a TV in the shop. Like, he didn't believe in having a TV in the shop, which was like, this is a barbershop, you know. It just didn't make any sense to us, you know. But again, good guy, you know. The place was always nice. It never had any issues, you know. And even like the music, like, it just wasn't the vibe. It wasn't a good vibe. But at the same time, what I did learn from being there was, I remember, so I went to that shop, and it was maybe 4 of us that worked there. And that's when I started to feel like I could cut hair a little bit. And the only reason why is because I took a lot of the things from being the last, from being the worst barber in the shop, at least in my eyes. But I took a lot of those things from those previous shops, and then once I started to be around people that I felt like I could really be better than, then I really started to like push myself a little bit more. So I'm like getting a little bit better, but I'm still not where I need to be. So one day, this is like probably the turning point. So one day I'm talking to Tony. He says, yeah, I'm actually about to have 2 other barbers come in and work. So the next day, Brian and Sheldon come in. Now, Brian and Sheldon used to work at a shop in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Brian and Sheldon, the shop that they were at closed down, so they were looking for a new one. They came to work with us at this shop, and they basically blew the hinges off the doors. Like, from this point forward, I was a barber. From this point forward, like, I knew what it took to be a beast. From this point forward, like, I knew what it took to really put in work and become successful as a barber, as an entrepreneur. So between the 2 of them, I owe Brian and Sheldon a lot. Sheldon specifically, and he owns the shop now, and we're gonna get to that later. Sheldon was extremely meticulous and took his time with every client, like super meticulous, almost to a fault. But I learned from him just really how dedicated you had to be able to make sure you got every inch of hair the way it needed to be. But between the two of them, I learned by far the most from Brian. Brian right now is still the owner of Signature Cuts in Stone Mountain. We're gonna get to that later. But I mean, Brian helped me out in ways. He helped me to get my credit better. He helped me to buy a car. He helped me. I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot. We got to be very, very close, and he saw a lot of things in me that I didn't really see in myself. So I owe a lot of what I'm able to do now to him. And he was the first. So two things that happened specifically. One thing was he said you can either have a job or a career. He said you can either have a job or a career. Because at one point, and I remember this is right around when I met Danielle, he was saying I was working at night at Walmart so I could get a steady paycheck, and I was working in the shop in the daytime. But what was happening was I was sleeping in the shop half the time because I had to get some rest to work at night. So I'd be in the back sleeping, waiting for somebody to come and tell me, like, oh, there's a client up front for you. I'm like, you're not going to make money like that. And I remember when Brian came, he was like, I can't tell you what to do, but I'll say this. You can either have a job or a career. You have to pick one. Now, if you want to have a career and be an entrepreneur, you can be a barber. You can maybe own a shop. You can do X, Y. You're your own business. You just pay your booth rent. Or you can have a job at Walmart. And it's not knocking Walmart by any means. But I literally, I remember at one point telling Danielle, before I made this decision, that I was going to just, contemplate and just stop cutting hair and just work at Walmart. And like, she almost dropped the phone. But what Brian told me, when he told me that, eventually it got to a point where I quit Walmart and I 100% became invested into becoming the best barber that I could. And that really changed my life. So what I had to change was my attitude and my approach to what it took to be a good barber. Because it wasn't that I wasn't great with my clients, because I feel like I'm pretty personable, for the most part. And I think that my clients liked me, which I always kind of feel like is the part of the reason why I've become successful in the industry, is because of my rapport with people. But you can't really make money if you're not consistent. That's just not going to happen. So what Brian taught me was you have to be the first person there and the last person to leave. Period. So every day that you're supposed to work, you need to be the first person there and the last person to leave. You need to write down goals of specific amounts that you want to make. So what that means is, he said it. So if your goal at every Monday is to get $50, then you don't leave until you get $50. And like I said, this is back then, so these numbers are low, but I'm just keeping it real. Tuesday, another $50. Wednesday, $100. Thursday, $100. Friday, $150 or $200. Saturday, $200 to $250. Whatever those numbers were, you need to be the first person there, last person to leave, and don't leave until you make those numbers. But see, not only did he tell me that, but I watched both he and Sheldon do it. I watched as the other barbers would leave at 7 o'clock because, hey, it's 7 o'clock, I'm going home. So I watched them literally, and I watched him practice what he was preaching to me. So from that point forward, it was a wrap. It was just on a different level. And I personally didn't feel like I got as good as they did, because I thought that they were so top notch as barbers. But I knew that I could cut at that point. Like, that's when I started to feel like I think I'm kind of nice now. So think about that time span. From 2003, I got my license. This is around 2006 or so. So about a 3 to 4 year span it took for me to really figure these things out and to really humble myself and to really feel comfortable. And like I said, I just learned so much from those two, and specifically Brian. I owe them a lot. So I'm at this shop, and eventually Sheldon decides he's going to go and open up his own. So I follow Sheldon over to his shop over in Stone Mountain, and so we get over there, and I remember it was Sheldon, myself, my guy Grace, and my guy Will. And now Grace, Will, and myself were all in our early 20s. Grace and Will, I think, both went to Pro Way, I want to say, and they were both good, And then there was myself, and then Brian and Sheldon. So I remember Grace. Big shouts out to Grace. I was just talking to him a few weeks ago. I remember we used to like jokingly call ourselves the Dream Team because it was like the five, and it was like with the five of us. I mean, like it's a wrap. I'll never forget like joking around about that with Grace, and like by the time we got to Sheldon shop, I didn't know exactly where I was in the top five, whatever. I didn't really care if I was fifth, but I knew I was pretty good at this point. I felt confident, and whoever walk in, I could cut their hair and I'd be straight. It doesn't mean that it was perfect all the time, but I felt confident in myself to cut anybody. And I remember they put me in the first chair in the front, right opposite Brian. And Will and Grace were like kind of next to me, but opposite each other. Sheldon was in the back. There was a salon in the back, that was closed off. So, really, really nice shop. We were there for a little bit, and then things didn't really quite work out there. But again, like I said at the outset, every place that I've been to, if I wanted to go work there tomorrow, I'm pretty confident that I could. So I didn't leave on bad terms, but it was there was some disagreements because, ultimately I think that the best way I could put it is like this. The owners at the time basically felt like Brian and even myself were trying to eventually branch off and do our own thing. And they felt threatened by it. And, it's a weird situation because, if you feel threatened by somebody trying to better themselves and open their own business or open their own shop, that's more of a you problem. Because ultimately, you want to help to groom people for them to be their own business managers, their own owners. And I remember getting grilled by one of the owners at the time and him basically questioning me. And it was really actually uncomfortable, to be honest with you, because I don't really get called out of my integrity too often. It hasn't happened many times in my life. It's very, very rare. So for that to happen was just kind of crazy at the time. So eventually I go to the new shop. So we get over to Signature Cuts. So Brian owns this shop. Brian basically was the one, like I said, that really put me on, that helped me learn the ropes, did everything to make me a real barber. So I was loyal to him, and like I said, I still kept a good relationship with Sheldon. Still had a good relationship even with the owners, with the other owners. But I just felt like it was the best move for me. After feeling like my integrity was being called into question, it's hard to get past that. It's hard to have an honest working environment if you feel like the people that are running the place don't have you either have your best interest or just don't trust you. So we parted ways. And I remember they actually gave me a cake on my last day, which was interesting, but big shouts out to True Cuts. They're still my family, so big shouts out to them. So we're at Signature Cuts. So we're getting close to the end of part 3. So Signature Cuts, Brian and I over there holding it down. Brian's, he still is a beast. At this point, I felt like I was kind of second in line to him. We had barbers kind of come and go. But we had a fairly stable crew. But at this point, I really felt as though I felt legit. At this point, Will, what's going on? At this point, I really felt as though I was confident in all the work that I was doing as a barber. So as I'm at Signature Cuts, I'm starting to build my clientele. Everything's getting pretty consistent. Danielle and I think are about to get married. Everything's going pretty good. I run into an opportunity where there's a barber school that opens up right down the street from me, right down the street from where I live. And I remember walking by and seeing signs that said, instructor training, barber school, $150 a month, $50 down, or I just remember the prices being very low. And I had never thought about teaching before. Never. And I remember telling Brian about it. And Brian said, we should go to school. And he was like, you should definitely go to get your instructor's license. So like I said, this place was right down the street from where literally walking distance from where I lived. So I said, you know, I'll just give it a try. So I walked in and I met Ms. D, owner of, I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of it now. CEI. CEI, that's what it's called now. So back then it was called Cutting Edge Institute. So Brian, myself, there was a handful of other barbers. No, there was, I think, three or four other barber instructors that were there. Danielle, she went there. Make a long story short, that's where I went to get my instructor's license. So between Brian and Ms. D, they were probably two of the most influential people in my life as far as the industry is concerned, outside of my family, outside of Rachel specifically, my sister Rachel. But I remember starting to learn how to do lesson plans. And for those of you that know Ms. D, you know how phenomenal of a teacher she is. Sometimes she can be a little chaotic, and that's my people's. Like I said, if y'all know, if I call her right now, we could join this live together and just oh, my bad. We could join live right now together and just be laughing it up. You know, she used to call me Big Brother Almighty, even though I was younger than her. It was kind of crazy, but anyway. But from her, you know, I learned a lot about teaching, and I remember her telling me, she was like, "You're going to be the one from this group. You're going to be the one," and I'm like, okay, and and you know, unfortunately, I think that my relationship with her and the fact that she really did take me under her wing kind of started to kind of mess up my relationship a little bit with Brian, because Brian was having a harder time becoming an instructor because he was running the barbershop too. And for me, I was a barber and I was paying booth rent, and at the time I was living at home. So I mean, I didn't have a lot of responsibility. I could focus on learning how to be a good instructor, learning how to be a good educator, and I could still cut hair. And eventually one day she gave me a deal that I couldn't refuse at the time. She basically said, you know, I'm gonna allow you to basically cut your clients on the off hours in the lab, you know, when you're not teaching, or when you're not, you know, in training, which basically meant going and having free booth rent. And I wrestled with it for a long time, you know, but the numbers just didn't make sense to stay at the shop. And I knew that my future was going to be, at least to some degree, in teaching, even though I still was going to cut hair. And that was a hard conversation to have with Brian. It was difficult because, like I said, I owed so much to him. You know, I owed a lot to him in regards to him just really trying to help me to become a professional. That was a difficult conversation, you know, and, you know, since then, you know, we see each other from time to time. I'll pop into the shop and see how he's doing. But, you know, that really was the start of my teaching and education journey. That was the start of me becoming an educator. And that's where we're going to leave you at for this episode. So if you haven't already looked at episode 1 and 2 from our little series about the journey, make sure you check it out. I'm looking forward to telling you about, in the next episode, we're going to talk about as I started teaching and what that was like. And then I'm going to talk about shop ownership and some of the ups and downs that Danielle had with that. I'm gonna be very, very transparent. Some stuff I have to hold back on because when I write the third book, it's gonna be in the third book. If you haven't had a chance to check out the first book, Journey to State Board, this is what it looks like. It's a quick read. It talks about a little bit about my upbringing and when I went to barber school. The second book is actually in the works right now. It's being edited. The cover is being critiqued and being tightened up. That book is going to be called 20 Ways to Be a Great Educator. So for anybody who has any thought about becoming an instructor, an educator, a teacher, it's good for you. And I say that because, you know, it's geared towards the barber and beauty industry. So if you're an esthetician, a nail tech, a barber, makeup artist, stylist, it's geared towards us. But again, there's so many different gems in it that are based off of just people and coaching and motivation and advisement and relationships. And like, there's so many different pieces to it, because I don't really view myself as an instructor or an educator or a teacher. I think I more so prefer to really refer to myself as a coach. And I'm still learning every day. I'm still trying to figure things out. Danielle will tell you that. I promise you, if you ask her. So I'm very much still a work in progress. But I think I know what I'm talking about to an extent. so I'm looking forward to dropping that. We're looking at hopefully Leech. I see you. We're looking at hopefully dropping that in October officially. So we're looking forward to the release of that and other great things. Big shouts out to everybody who joined. Big shouts out to Shiora Cone Consulting. You know what it is for all your state board needs. If you need any help, if you need some consulting, have any questions, make sure you reach out to us. Big shouts out to Atlanta Technical College. You know what it is. You know what it is. You see the name, you see the branding. I just threw this shirt on today because it matched with the shorts that I have on. I have the Warriors shorts on, like the yellow with the blue and the white. So I threw this on just to, before I go on my bike ride. It just happened to match. But it's that excellence. I'm not gonna hold the whole shirt up. We're not gonna get crazy. But it's that excellence that we're providing for you. Leech, I see you. Now I'm never hard to catch, boss. You know what it is. But I am on the clock right now, so I'm trying. This is like cross marketing for ATC as well as some other things. But big shouts out to ATC. Big shouts out to, again, everybody who joined and listened in. This will be available shortly on the YouTube page and also too on the Instagram series section. And big shouts out to all the barber schools, all the cosmetology schools, everybody who's trying to push our culture forward, who's trying to do something positive, all the entrepreneurs out there. And I'm probably forgetting somebody, and I'll probably remember later. I'm going to kick myself, but make sure you check us out if you have any questions. Make sure you hit me up in the DMs. I'm always available. If I don't pick up, I'm probably running around outside with Giselle after I do my work for school. ATC will be back on campus officially for the start of the new semester next week on Monday. We have a lot of big things in the works. The instructor program, pending SACS approval. We have one last approval to go through. But if you know somebody who needs to get the instructor license, pending that last approval, we'll be starting in January. And if things fall the way that we're hoping, I'm going to be the instructor for that class, which I'm going to be very passionate about. Well, I am very passionate about already. So it's been a long journey to get that put together. So if you know anybody that needs instructor training, make sure you have them reach out to me. If they're thinking about it, just in general, have them reach out to me. If it's you, make sure you reach out to me. We also have a barber battle coming up, October 10th. My guy, Just the Barber. You'll see some of that listed on my stories as well and on my page. He's having a female barber battle, student barber battle, master barber battle, and I think one or two others. So you're going to want to be in the building for that as well. All right, I'm out. Done talking. Thank you all for joining. I don't know how long this was, but hopefully I didn't take you from away from your day too much. Everybody who joined again, thank you. We're going to keep it crisp. I got to start answering the phone because people are calling me. Transitional Web Design, I see you. We need to link up. We out.